Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the fourth episode of Policy Circles webinar series, Delhi Dialogues. Today, we will discuss the emerging opportunities for India to assert its position in the post-COVID world. This webinar coincides with India taking over the presidency of the UN Security Council in August. So in this 1.5 hours, we will discuss a host of issues concerning India's global engagement. Now, moving ahead with the show, we have a panel of eminent speakers who will share their opinion on the topic. Let me first introduce our speakers to all of you. Dr. Joy Thomas, Professor, Public Health Institute of Health and Management, Melbourne. He will be moderating the discussion today. Mr. Manjeev Puri, former Ambassador of India to Nepal. Mr. Seshadri Chari, Strategic Affairs Expert. Maya Mirchandani, award-winning and Head of Media Studies, Ashoka University. Then we have Dr. Aruna Sharma, former Secretary, Ministry of Steel, Development, and welcome to all. Also, I extend a the audience. After the presentations, you could ask your questions to any of the panelists. Please send your queries through the chat box. And before commencing the show, I would request the audience to kindly mute themselves. This will help us in ensuring the seamless flow of the show today. I would now invite Dr. Thomas to take charge of the session.
Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Indeed, it's a great privilege to be among the titans of the sector. And we have an extremely experienced and knowledgeable speakers for the session today. Today, we are looking at India's global engagement. And we have ambassador who actually practice, and we have esteemed journalists, and also we have a very experienced presenter. I just thank everybody. And as my introductory note, I just wanted to say 2-3 words. August 1st, India will be taking charge as the chair of UN Security Council. And the Indian mission has come out with a work plan for 1 month. And India will be focusing mostly on the peace building operation and what is its global ramification. And also they will be looking at some of the specific issues like Myanmar issue. And also Africa, they will be focusing, Asia, they will be focusing on peace building operation. And one of the significant event is, a signature event is looking at the maritime security, and our Prime Minister is supposed to chair that session globally. And also I've been told that in August, most of the UN Security Council meetings will be in-person meetings. We don't know that. Does it mean Prime Minister will be traveling to New York and personally be at Security Council? We don't know. But I just wanted to contribute towards the discussion saying that if you look at globally, if you look around, the most significant issue is the COVID pandemic. We are talking about 4 million people dying, almost 130 million people living with infection. And I would submit that, probably today, the global health rejuvenation is equivalent to global peace, world peace. And whoever is working in the area of global peace, they should take leadership in the area of global health. India may utilize this opportunity to look at how to give leadership in a COVID response globally. So I hope this UN Security Council opportunity India may focus that. And second is about, most probably India will speak about the Security Council reform. We know that the Security Council is controlled by 5 veto holding power. And there is a strong move towards India's position at the permanent seat. But I would even submit saying that the UN General Assembly is a democratic platform. And probably Security Council itself should be reformed, that the veto council system should go. It should be like a board of governance, and then expand it, and instead of 5, maybe expand it to 15. All are equal responsibility and equal say in the global matters. These are the 2 things I just want to contribute towards our discussion regarding what is India's role in the global affairs. And I invite our speakers. And I assume that you will be introducing the first speaker.
Mr. Manjeev Puri, former Ambassador of India to Nepal, there is a humble request to give your presentation.
Professor Thomas, Smriti, my dear friends, especially Aruna, my batchmate, Seshadri Chari ji, I see you coming on and off on the photographs. Maya, I don't see where you are. But I want to thank you all. You know, you asked me to speak right at the beginning, and I'm willing to do so. But I want to leave one thought with you. I'm not here because I was ambassador in Nepal. I'm actually here because I've spent more than 10, 15 years dealing with the United Nations. I used to be the Joint Secretary dealing with the UN. I was ambassador and DPR when India served last on the Security Council. I led the climate change negotiations for more than 5 years. So, my background is that. I also happen to have been ambassador to Nepal. I'm very delighted at that particular element. Now, Smriti, I'm happy to start off, but as a practitioner, I may end up, pouring a bit of cold water on many of the ideas that people have, because their assumptions of the UN and multilateralism is a little different from what reality is. So I leave it to you. You want me to speak first or last? It's up to you. But if you all say go ahead, then I shall happily go ahead and say what I want to, and I'm very happy to hear people speak from their heart and so on and so forth, because I believe that frankly, you have to have your heart guide your mind, and that's where the willpower comes. So are you all comfortable that I speak first?
Absolutely.
Ambassador,
Absolutely.
Professor Thomas.
Ambassador, you may go ahead first, and we have an opportunity for asking questions. So probably you can have a summary of recast your point of view, because this is a great discussion, and the practitioner's point of view, academician's point of view, and the dreamer's point of view, because foreign policy is also about expectation. So, Ambassador, please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Thomas. And I love the two words that you used, dreamers, academics. Dreamers, very important as far as I'm concerned. Not just the young people, but dreamers among all those, including people like me, because if you won't dream, you ain't gonna get there. Now, let's start with a few things. We are assuming the presidency of the Security Council. It's only for 1 month and it rotates alphabetically. So, in a sense, it's a kind of routine, but an important pedestal for you to be able to do things. Professor Thomas, I don't think the Prime Minister is traveling to New York, but I do think the Foreign Minister is going there for 1 or 2 sessions, which are being scheduled. How many others will come? I don't know. It's difficult to say. We have a reason to go there and be there. Others, well, it's not their presidency. Why should they come across? But in any case, I completely agree with you. When you have in-person meetings, lots happens. Remember, of course, that the formal sessions of the Security Council are just that, formal sessions. What everybody does in each of these sessions is to take 1 or 2 themes which are of interest to them and try and push them a little bit. And generally speaking, the other members of the Security Council look at you favorably because you are chairing the session on that particular occasion. This time, what I understand from what our ambassador to the UN has written, and there was a middle in the Times of India some time back, we will naturally focus on peacekeeping. And we are looking at something called Protect the Protectors. It's some kind of app that we want to launch. Very good idea. You marry technology with all these things. India is at the forefront of these things. Maritime security, certainly an important idea and something for which India particularly has a great deal of vested interest in the matter. I'm sure we'll raise the subject of terrorism. And I did read that we would talk about Afghanistan, which I think is perhaps one of the more important subjects. Can it go beyond that? I don't know. Things have to fructify, various things have to come together, because some of the biggest and most important global players are involved in the subject of Afghanistan. But in any case, if you can use your presidency, good idea. I want to tell you that exactly 10 years back, in the month of August 2011, India held the presidency of the UN Security Council. And it was for the first time that the Security Council issued some kind of statement on Syria. Everything was blocked till then. And it took a great deal of dexterity on the part of our then ambassador and our entire team to be able to coax people to at least say something on the subject and therefore register a degree of inherent interest. I think these things matter and these things should be done. They are very important. Now, Professor, what happens very often is that we conflate the Security Council with big global issues. So let's take one that you mentioned, COVID, and let me take the one which really is engaging the world in the really big sense of the term, and where multilateral action is being called for, is climate change. Now, I'm an old-fashioned guy. I'll be very honest with you. We should not conflate global interest issues with the Security Council. The Security Council by name is just is an instrument which everybody tends to think that all issues which can be securitized should be discussed there. No, that's the UN General Assembly. After all, your well-being is not discussed in the Security Council. That should be the principal thing. It's a place which was traditionally built for traditional areas, and frankly, expanding them beyond that, or rather beyond the periphery, are matters which you should take very carefully, and a country like India needs to be particularly careful. Let me tell you why. You know, in the Security Council, finally speaking, there are 5 countries which matter for decision. To the best of my knowledge, in perhaps the entire 70 years, but at least the last 20 or 30 that I'm relatively familiar with, there's been only one resolution that has been adopted in the Security Council where none of the permanent 5, actually exercised a veto, and yet the resolution went. And this was 1973 in the case of Libya, where Russia and China abstained, which, if you can figure out, it means they actually gave the go-by. So that's the nature of the game. This is one place where when the permanent members abstain, it means they are saying yes. And where the non-permanent members abstain, it means that they're saying no. It's very interesting, and it needs to be really understood, because process and procedures are extremely important in international governance. We must always remember the United Nations, the World Bank, the WTO, they are platforms of international governance. They're not international governments, which in developing countries becomes the order of the day. If you drive around New Delhi, the UN and its various agencies and their ambassadors have huge big cars, big size flags, and they roam around the place, as if they are dictating something. You ask someone about SDGs and people say, oh, that's the UN's goal. No, it's not. It's my goal. These are merely secretariat members. But look, many people will tell me, Manjeev, you are an old hardened practitioner, so you carry on this way. The reality is very different. Maybe it is. Maybe it ain't. But I am looking at India not being necessarily a rule taker in the future, but a rule maker, or at least someone that will add to the making of the rule. Life is difficult. Let me draw your attention. So, which is why I say that on COVID, we should be a little careful. We should be a little careful about bringing things into the Security Council, because out there, you don't have the final say. You're less than bit players in the game. So what we are doing at the WTO, what we could do at the WHO, those are important subjects. And Professor Thomas, you and I had an opportunity to have a brief telephonic call. I'd be very happy to tell you that WHO is perhaps the point at which we should be utilizing our ability. I'm afraid the last 1 year, to my mind, has not been one where we managed to leverage the opportunities and possibilities. But, we can discuss this in various ways. Similarly, climate change. Let it remain at the UN Convention on Climate Change. That's the place where this needs to be discussed. This isn't a matter where 5 countries can sit and have vetoes. It doesn't work like that. And let them keep focusing on what they have to do. They haven't done a great job as far as DRC is concerned. They haven't done a great job in Africa. And will they let you even discuss Afghanistan? I'm not sure about that. Except for the fact, of course, that there are already subject matters there. India heads one of the Taliban committees and so on. So, there are certain opportunities which are there and which you should take, because I think Afghanistan is that matter where the Security Council is the right forum and where we have an interest. And frankly speaking, yes, we are a little out of it and we need to be able to get in. And our being on the Security Council is an opportunity for us to, see to it that we are into the playing side of it. Stakeholding is asserted a little bit more. I personally think that's very important. Let me also take a minute and, talk about reform of the Security Council. Look, let me say something to you. By the year 2027 or 2028, whenever it is, India would be the largest country in the world. Now, sitting in India, we all have this huge big thing that, oh, population is a big problem. But actually, it isn't. I mean, I can go into the economics of population with everyone, but forget that. The fact that you are the largest country in the world makes your situation qualitatively different from being the second largest country in the world. Because then once the largest is there, your USP goes in a various senses of the term. Secondly, we have been badly hit by COVID. The fact of a 10% decline in our GDP has meant that we are no longer among the 5 largest economies. We are now at 6th, 7th place, but we need to claw back. And if we are able to claw back, up till now, the signs are not so great, but we will. Demography is on our side. Globalization has worked to our benefit. If we claw back, and let me say in the next 20 odd years, we are among the 3 largest economies or 4 largest economies in the world, then please understand that there is a general and overarching reasoning that India needs to be part of those who make decisions. You know, when the G20 was formed in 2008-9, of course, the main idea was that you shouldn't let China off the hook. They shouldn't be, free riders. They shouldn't be able to get away. But let me tell you, it wasn't lost on any of the guys that India, Brazil, Nigeria, etc., they shouldn't be able to get away either. And on a longer term, let them also be part of those who bear global responsibilities. Now, responsibilities come with being global players. So I think this is something we have to understand. And I am so glad that at the level of the Prime Minister and at all levels, we finally come back again to pushing for UN Security Council reform. Let me take a minute of your time here. You know, there are 5 sort of big players. 3 of them are easily understandable. After all, they were victors of World War II, the United States, the UK, and Russia. How did the other 2 come in? Well, both were grandfathers. One easily understood, France. The UK would have liked to have had them. The US didn't really oppose. That was fine. How did China come in? It was grandfathered by the United States. That's how it became a permanent member. And till 1971, the seat was held by what is today Taiwan, the Republic of China. And then when they switched, it was merely changing the credential. So we tend to forget. We were not lucky. We were not grandfathered for a variety of reasons, whatever may be the fact. Did we ever get a chance and all? I don't think that happened. But therefore, we need to work much harder. And it's a very tough call. I want to tell you that in the mid-1990s, there was a concerted effort to somehow pull Japan and Germany into the Security Council's permanent structures. Remember, that was one global sweet spot in the world when the Chinese were not big enough, the Russians, the Soviet Union had collapsed, and the United States was the sole player. So an attempt was made. It was India which took the lead and said, no, 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 no. Hey, guys, that's not on. The net result, the bar was raised by us. So instead of the fundamental resolution being a 50% resolution in the UN General Assembly, it's raised to 2/3, which makes it that much harder for you to get through. Quite apart from the fact that you need all the members, the permanent members in their national parliaments to approve that this particular change, i.e. through their national ratification processes, ratify the amendment to the Charter of the United Nations. Very tough call. But remember, if you won't continue to make concerted efforts on it, then the ball will simply slip away, and it won't come simply because one day there's lightning and it will fall down. It doesn't happen like this. We are in the business of calibratedly taking things forward. We're not in the business of having been grandfathered and things are not going to work out like that. So I'm very glad that we've decided to work on it. Remember, I just use one word. You must express frustration, but never be frustrated, because this is a very long haul. After all, whose interest is it that you should get onto the Security Council? This is global power play. This is the way this game will happen. But India is going to remain a major player. And let me, at the last point, just make this. Perhaps one of the more defining global negotiations at the moment is the one on climate change. You know, it isn't just a negotiations on environment. It certainly isn't one on energy. It's actually a strategic negotiations which are taking place, because as things currently stand, your GDP, your energy use, and I'm afraid CO2 emissions are directly linked in direct proportion. Tomorrow, we are able to do away with carbon, very good, but nobody is moving towards it. Look at what has happened in COVID. You asked people for a simple thing. Can you please remove the IPRs so that the COVID vaccines can be produced everywhere? Everyone's looking here and there. Yeah, some people make some gestures, but that's about it. Nothing more than that. No one's willing to do this, because this is the reality of life, the way things are. And we keep using this word post-COVID. I presume and hope that we understand that we are only talking about a world in which China is now the other alternate. and not that anything else that COVID has done. And let's remember this particular fact. There is hardly any change in the way humans react, in the way countries react, and that's exactly the way it's going to go forward. Use of morality, use of principles has always been done, and there's no reason why it shouldn't happen again. So I'll stop now. I am so confident and so strong in my belief that my country has a manifest destiny. And I say this basically because of the demographics which are in our favor and the fact that we are endowed and benefited by globalization, which in a sense has leveled the advantages of technology. Given these facts, I think, we need to do just one thing. We need to be pressing on the accelerator, even though we know that the car ain't going as fast as we'd like it to go. But keep your foot on the accelerator, keep pressing on it, be there. Economics at the end of the day really matters. It is the bottom line for a country of size that India is, and for the fact that we do represent let me say, an autonomous and different strand of global civilizations. Unlike the situation that Japan had 25 years, second largest economy, and yet calling no shots. No, we must always assert the fact that yes, there is an independent view, and this view reflects 10% of humankind. It's an important view, and we must stress it. Democracy, each of these things are our plus points. Thank you very much, Professor Thomas.
Thank you, Ambassador Puri. And the highlight is very interesting. You should be frustrated about the global situation, but you should not show the frustration. And
sir, the other way around. You should show the frustration, not be frustrated.
Okay, right. Okay. I try to play with the word to say that, you should demonstrate the frustration, but that may not be the diplomacy. But also, you very rightly presented. If you look at one of the pressing issues in the environmental catastrophe, I may take the freedom to use the word environmental crisis. And you may diplomatically put in some other way. But as an academician, I would say what you're facing is one of the environmental catastrophe. But UN Security Council may not be able to take it. And also, securitizing all the issues may not be productive at all. I agree with you. But sometimes we have to push the agenda a little further, push the envelope a little further. So India may utilize to push the agenda a little further on some of the non-traditional issues. That's the point I would like to present it as an academic point of view. I completely agree with you, the pragmatism involved in the global diplomacy. And also the issue of the frustrating part, but not demonstrating the frustration about India's role in the Security Council. But I would even suggest go one more ahead. India should even ask for changing the Security Council setup. Security Council should be a democratic institution. Right now, it is not a democratic institution. Maybe we should change the dialogue. We should change the demand. No more membership. The Security Council should be open democratic process, like a governing board of or a company. It should be an elected governing board or the global body of UN General Assembly. I'm just putting up a word as an academician. So your opening remark is fantastic. You set the tone for a discussion. What should be India's role? That is based on pragmatism. At the same time, play with the game in what others are playing, and be cautious about it. I understand very well, but your opening remarks is very informed, diplomatic presentation. Thank you very much, Ambassador. To invite Mr. Seshadri Chari, and he is one of the top practicing politicians. We saw one of them practicing diplomat. Now we have a practicing political leader. He's a journalist, he is author, and a strategic foreign policy analyst. And he is a veteran Swayam Sevak Sangh member, and he's a member of a Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh. And currently he is serving as the National Executive Committee member of the Bharatiya Janata Party. And formerly he served as the head of the Foreign Affairs Cell of the BJP headquarters. So Mr. Chari is eminently experienced and qualified to speak about India's foreign policy and also India's global engagement. Sir, the mic is for you. Thank you.
Okay. So I was, so now it is formally beginning. My part of the show is beginning formally. Okay. So as I was telling earlier, I am logging on from my mobile. So I'm prone to lot of technical problems as usual. So I'm going to sort of go through the process a little bit slowly and peacefully. Two, three things. Uh, uh, Besides my engagement with the RSS and besides my engagement with the BJP, I'm also teaching geopolitics and international relations in Manipal University. And I'm also heading the China Study Center here. So these are all some of the additional things that I have done. And of course, I mean, compared to Ambassador Puri, I'm nowhere near United Nations framework. But more importantly, uh, uh, I had a stint with United Nations in Sudan, South Sudan, as a consultant on governance. So that is my only engagement with the UN as far as understanding the system is concerned. Now, as we all know, the United Nations itself is running, I mean, it's the 76th year. So at the age of 76, it's quite well past the mandatory retirement age in any corporate world. And as far as the Indian political system is concerned, it is the age at which I mean, one would expect the politicians to retire. So at that kind of an age, the United Nations is there. And so that obviously, I do not know whether uh, with age comes wisdom, they say. But as far as the United Nations is concerned, this wisdom that they have acquired in all the 76 years, we do not know if it is accompanied by the physical ability to what you call translate the wisdom into action. Meanwhile, there is some information as far as the UN Secretary General is concerned. Um, uh, I think India has already conveyed to the Secretary General that they will back him for the re-election. So, in such a situation, as Ambassador Puri very rightly pointed out, this is not the first time that we are going to hold that position of president for the a 1 month term. Out of the 10, out of the 15 members and 10 non-official members, we have held it earlier also, and we will again be holding the same position in December 2022. That will be the end of the 2-year term. So we will have two such terms in between. And more importantly, we are actually sitting in the presidential chair at a time when in 2021 itself, in these 7 months, uh, three very important things have taken place, two in our region and one slightly out of our region but within our reach. One is the Israeli airstrikes on Hamas held areas in Gaza. The second, of course, is the military coup in Myanmar. And the third is the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. So if you look at these three aspects, we have we have enough material to tackle these issues, and also enough agenda as far as our these issues are concerned. Now, as Ambassador Puri mentioned about the presidential statement on Syria, actually, as far as Syrian issue is also concerned, there was a move that there should be a resolution on Syria, but it was our tactics and a little bit of diplomatic maneuver that India made that we successfully convinced the members that instead of a resolution, it should be a presidential statement. Therefore, a presidential statement does not commit ourselves to so many other things. So these are all niceties. So similarly, when we are the president, I think we should be able to come down to that kind of presidential statement, and we should also decide if we are going to have some sort of a resolution on certain things, especially as far as terrorism is concerned. We are we know the problems that are going to exist, that are existing in Afghanistan after the US withdrawal. So we are no strangers to terrorism, and we are going to face a lot of problems as far as terror issues are concerned. So how are we going to tackle that? And how are we going to tackle this whole issue is also to be seen. When we look at the whole issue from the diplomatic point of view, we should not bring in bilateral and multilateral relationship in these things. These are all certain things that we have to settle out of the United Nations format. But more importantly, we should remember that we cannot forget the elephant in the room. So there is already some sort of an axis between China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan as far as Afghanistan is concerned. So this is going to be a serious problem as far as the region is concerned. But although it is a regional problem for us, for the world, it may be a small issue, but for us, it's going to be a very major issue. So we'll be tackling terrorism from that point of view. Again, as far as sanctions are concerned, we are already suffering because of US sanctions and selective sanctions on Myanmar and Iran. As president, how we will be tackling this issue and how we will be tackling this issue from the India's point of view is also to be considered. And even as we are taking over as the president, and to be very frank on this issue, becoming the president of for a month is not going to be such a big feather on our cap. It's more or less some sort of a procedural issue. So we should not be actually looking at it from that point of view, but we should be looking at the larger issue of how we are going to use United Nations platform for our benefit and to our advantage. We have huge problems as far as the global issues are concerned. I mean, if you look at the global crisis, we have got a huge global crisis of food security. We have got huge problems as far as internally displaced persons and internationally displaced persons are concerned, IDs and IDPs. Climate change is a very huge issue that we will all have to tackle. It's not just we are going to tackle in this 1 month, but also going to tackle as far as the next 2 years are concerned. Terrorism, of course, is a very big problem. And finally, we are talking of post-COVID, but it is not yet post-COVID. We are now facing second phase and third wave and fourth wave, and we don't know how many more waves are going to come. So, in general, all over the world, there is a feeling that the established health systems have collapsed. Established health infrastructures have collapsed. And this health infrastructure collapse is not limited only to that, but it also infringing on the economic aspects. So these are all some of the issues that we are all going to face as a global community in the coming months, if not coming years. So obviously, this 1 month is not going to be the template on which we are going to discuss and come to a conclusion as far as other issues are concerned. But more importantly, I think we should be able to use this particular period for our benefit and also diplomatically maneuver ourselves, put ourselves in such a manner that we are able to get more eyeball, we are able to catch more people on our side, and we are able to look at the whole issues from not only India-centric point of view, but from a very global point of view, but at the same time, settle these issues from our advantage. I think there are other issues which we have to tackle as far as India vis-a-vis UN is concerned, like separatism, extremism, Afghanistan issue, and so many other issues. So I think these are some of the issues that we can go into details during the question answer session or in the coming issues. So I'll halt here and wait for some more inputs and question answer sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chari. You correctly analyzed the global situation and you emphasized the issue of the Middle East crisis. You also looked at the issue of Israel re-flaring up the Israel-Palestinian crisis. And of course, in our neighborhood, Myanmar issue is coming up. And probably that's an area India can play a very active role, because India has got a very friendly relationship with the military leaders of Myanmar. And probably we could do some, what they call it as a second channel of diplomacy. But particularly from a UN Security Council, maybe they could call for a consultation, maybe a dialogue could be opened up. And also, you very importantly highlighted the implications of US withdrawal from Afghanistan. And probably Taliban maybe have a much more active role in the governance of Afghanistan with the covert or overt support from some other axis of power. And how India is going to play on this will be very critical in our border, right in our border. Is beyond the Security Council issue. And also you rightly mentioned about the challenges of the COVID as a global health challenge and how we're going to deal with it. So we have in fact, a basket full of issues which India may have to use the opportunity of Security Council to flag it. And you also mentioned that 1 month is not a very significant contribution, but it gives a critical space for setting up India's agenda to the world body. And also there is an opportunity for chair's report, because not as a resolution, a chair's summary report will remain as a historical contribution of India towards the global dialogue. So that will be a very critical stage. Let's see how they're going to play on this. And if you look at the agenda for the activity, they're going to focus on terrorism. Definitely there is a two flagship program. One is that. Second is the security or the maritime security. These are the two things it seems they're going to highlight on that. So our next speaker, let me invite Dr. Aruna Sharma. He is also a practitioner from Indian Administrative Service, and she presents herself as a development economics practitioner, and she was a secretary for the Ministry of Health and also Ministry of Steel of the Government of India, and she was the member of the RBI High-Level Committee, and most importantly, she looked at the issue of two books she contributed, Resource Convergence and Mantra Model. This is two books she wrote. So, and it seems she is going to talk about the need for focusing on one sector, for example, steel. If you take a leadership in one sector, that will be, we will be able to leverage globally. That is, that's the one interesting point of view she's putting forward. And let me invite Dr. Ayuna Sharma.
Thank you.
Sharma,
thank you so much.
The floor is for you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Joe, and thank you, the colleagues. So it's an advantage to have everything. So besides talking on the core sector and taking a lead there, I'll also like to make a mention what Professor Joe said in his opening remarks, that during the formation of United Nations after the World War II in 1945, so besides security and peace, it also talked about social progress, human rights, and now SDG. So therefore, it is very important that the entire focus into our 1 month advantage, or even as a participant in the United Nations Security Council member, India should put the attention again and again to these points of social progress, HR, and the SDG. And it is very important what my colleague Manjeev Puri also rightly said, to be a lead and center point into the various global discussions. Like, just to give you an example, what Professor Joe mentioned, I'll make a brief mention that chairing the Global Forum on Steel set the agenda when the world was thinking to club the progress and expansion of steel production, especially targeting to India and China. So China was anyway, it has reached the peak and we have to grow 3 times. Now, as you chair it, as you are at the steering wheel, it makes the whole difference, because we changed the definition of excess capacity of saying that how much we domestically consume. So India is domestically consumed 90. So we did away with that bar and we are expanding at a great pace. Similarly, I was instrumental to be a part in the human rights thing, and today it becomes very relevant because HIV/AIDS, let me tell you, when that medicine India was making it the cheapest, The world IPR, which was mentioned by my previous speakers, was not allowing because of product and process patenting for India to manufacture. The global need was to get HIV/AIDS medicine cheap. So it was not talked in just the Security Council. It was the other bodies of the UN, which came as the ONHRC, which came as the general body meeting where the human rights issue was raised. And through the lens of the human rights, it was agreed upon to remove the IPR and allow India to manufacture. I think time has come exactly the same thing for the COVID vaccination, where we have to use these other forums to guide the Security Council and decide and take the right decision, which are important to move ahead with it. So, having said that, it is very important that when we are talking India with 1.3 billion population and historic reasons are there, we cannot be ignored. So, India has to create its niche and create a presence for not just developed economies, but for developing economies and the underdeveloped economies. That voice and that voting rights in the Security Council has to be a constant agenda which needs to be pursued as we go ahead. COVID has enabled to sort of as an equalizer. Everybody suffered. It was an issue of survival, economy, business, and across the economies, it has hit them bad. So, what is very important is that the United Nations Security Council should not become like a Cholurica bridge, of the Honduras, where technology is fantastic, but it is of no use. The bridge is just a spot to go and admire, but not of any use. Today, security has to switch over to what has been beautifully spelled as SDG. And how do you bring this? How do you make it operative? I'm very, very clear, having worked with these organizations in different phases of my career, that it is the other organizations which has to be focused upon, whether they are your FAO, whether it's IFED, or it is ILO, or whether it is IMF, or whether it's UNESCO, or whether it is the Economic and Social Council, because it is here that you can bring in these agendas very strongly, which then goes into the Security Council, which are on the terms of what I said before, the social progress, HR, and SDGs. Because the COVID has given us that opportunity to say that it's time now to bring these things also center stage instead of just a lip service, like what I say, the Cholurica Bridge. That great, great, we all believe in human rights, we all believe in equity, we want SDGs, and it becomes more like a rhetoric instead of converting into a reality. So it is very, very important that when we have that this tiny opportunity of 1 month, and what is a paper of the chair, besides what has been focused upon is on the terrorism and the maritime thing, I strongly feel one should strongly consider to talk about the social growth, nobody to be left behind, and how do we bring in this human rights elements into it so that the handling of the world population, the handling of the progress, the bringing in the equity reasons is becomes a talk of the center stage as we are moving ahead. Here, I will also like to make a mention that when we are talking about these different economies and we are talking about the growth, what is happening is the veto votes, we are talking about becoming a member of a Security Council. But being a voice there, we can at least, till we get the right to become a regular member, our voice has to be heard, our agenda has to be set. And this setting of agenda will only come when we are actively participating instead of being a spectator or a reactionist. Because many a times I find avoiding being an active member in these bodies, we miss the bus. And once any agenda comes up which is not conducive to India, our entire energy is going on in fighting out this agenda. So it is very important we set it. Today, if you look at the WHO, when we mentioned about it, now that is a forum which should come up very clearly that vaccine has to be without IPR, has to be made clear. It's a human rights issue. And that is where the voice has to come up. And the whole energy is going into pricing, negotiating pricing, how we are going to go about it. No, you have a base price and then move ahead with it, because the world is to be protected, the human life is to be protected, the human rights of the people is to be protected, and it is in the interest of the developed economies also Because if the rest of the world goes into poverty, it is going to adversely hit them in terms of more immigration, more problems, more kind of a hit into their progress, economic progress. So a health deterioration, bringing down the economy, hits everybody. So nobody remains in isolation. And today, because I've been working quite a lot into the digital world, the geographical boundaries no longer matter. What impacts in one place in terms of business trade impacts others. So various non-tariff barriers which we are talking about today, we talk of carbon emission as a non-tariff barriers. Maybe a time has come to bring in a non-tariff barriers when there is a issue about the SDG non-compliance, when there is an issue of health non-compliance, when there is an issue of vaccine not being provided as a non-compliance. I think it is a time to think out of the box and to hit them so that in the Security Council we are able to flag and bring in these issues also center stage, besides getting entangled into only the security measures, which very rightly said, many a times the solution lies more bilaterally and less everybody coming into it. And that is how it progressed. So I think I'll stop at this moment of time because I strongly feel the world body's voice has to be tuned to what is your national interest. And we are no less because just by sheer population, we can either contribute to the faster progress of the world or pull it down because if we don't grow, the others also don't grow. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ayuna Sharma. You rightly pointed out that India's position at the UN Security Council chairmanship, it is much more than just symbolic. And also it's an opportunity to explore the agenda beyond the traditional realm of security. And you also again mentioned that the need for looking at the IPR for ensuring access to COVID vaccine and COVID diagnostic materials. So this is, if you look at global agenda, this is going to be one of the major agenda. You rightly pointed out that. So hopefully India may voice our concerns about UN Security Council, the concerns of intellectual property rights, how that is going to act as a barrier for access to vaccines for everybody. And the COVID pandemic today, we know that since until everybody is vaccinated, nobody is safe. So that's the way it's going to come out with it. So COVID-related public health calamity is one of the most significant historical event in today's civilizational event, I may say that. So somehow India has to make their presence felt. And also there are two other precedents. For example, India signed MOUs with about 80 countries on health. Bilateral agreement is existing already. Similarly, there is a SARC's COVID fund is created by our Prime Minister. And also the vaccine distribution, about 60 countries benefited from Indian distribution of vaccine. So the global health-wise, India is playing a very critical role. And Security Council voicing that concern, articulating that concern, maybe we are just taking that one step forward and articulating the effort we take in the area of global diplomacy, health diplomacy. And as you also mentioned that we have looked at new opportunities for diplomacy. Maybe India coming out with a strong framework of health in the diplomacy. And I would even dare to go one step further. In today's world, the health is equivalent to world peace. Because we talked about 140 million people are living with the infection or they are affected by the COVID pandemic, 4 million people died. So I completely endorse your point of view, and I'm glad you highlighted and amplified that issue. So that way is a very fruitful discussion, and you give depth for our analysis about the possibility of India's role. Our next speaker is Ms. Maya Mirchandani. And she is a teacher, academician, head of the Department of Media Studies at the Ashoka University. And most importantly, she was a foreign affairs editor of NDTV. So she knows the foreign realm very well. So let me invite Dr. Maya Mirchandani, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Thomas, and thank you to the speakers who went before me. I don't know what really I can add, especially after Ambassador Manjeev Puri, Seshadri Chari, and Aruna Sharma have all spoken. But let me just I'll just speak very briefly just about not so much aspirations and hopes, but I think from my perspective about some concerns. In terms of the title of this webinar as well. I mean, this is not the first time India has been on the Security Council. It is not the first time India is assuming presidency of the Security Council either. So, it seems a little out of place in a sense to make a bigger deal of this 1 month that's coming up than we have in the past. Yes, it's true that we are still in the midst of a global pandemic, and so that itself poses different challenges on national leaderships at the international level as well. And that really brings me to my first point, which is that the United Nations fundamentally, in its genesis, in its ethos, is a multilateral organization. Yes, there is a Security Council. India has been negotiating for many years now to become a permanent member of the Security Council. That itself is a process that sort of peaks and crests depending on who's listening, who's not, which alliances are working or not. But the spirit of multilateralism is something that needs to be carried right through. So I take it. I take the point that when India is in the Security Council, when it's assuming presidency of the Security Council, it has the opportunity to put its own interests front and center. But I think what I would really sort of rate India's presidency on would be its ability to actually step back from its own interests and put the interests of the United Nations in a multilateral sense front and center. So this is just and sort of, this is my personal opinion, of course. The fact is that when it comes to multilateral efforts on public health or on the vaccine diplomacy that we've been seeing, for example, what role can India play? Can it, when in a sense that within the country we are grappling with regulatory frameworks on emergency use vaccines, how will we guide those conversations globally? I think there is a question about developing countries receiving a large volume in order to vaccinate their populations. How will we cross those hurdles, including India being in that same space? But if we ourselves domestically have regulatory frameworks, how do we carry those negotiations on a multilateral stage? There are contradictions over there. I mean, I keep saying that a lot of diplomacy is actually just human psychology. So how do we manage those contradictions? I think would be an important question. The second, I think Ms. Sharma made very, very important points about not just security and peacekeeping and counterterrorism being the focus of the United Nations Security Council mandate, but also overseeing sustainable development goals and things like that. So what is our track record on delivering on SDGs? How much further do we have to go? I think those conversations are important for sure. But, I come back to the fact that the ethos of the UN, not only in terms of working together and global cooperation, was also about states keeping the interests of their citizens in mind, right? And how, I mean, there's a Charter of Human Rights, which India helped draft at the United Nations as well. So, how committed are we to having honest conversations about human rights? How committed are we to having honest conversations about what the principles of human rights are and should be constitutional values across countries? Are we interested in actually looking at the Human Rights Charter and its implementation across the UN membership body? Are we willing to make strong statements where we see rights being violated? Typically, India follows a policy of non-interference, in the matters of most countries, except maybe a few in the region, when Ambassador Puri will back me up, where we feel we have our own strategic interests at play. But the fact is, our problem with the United Nations Security Council all these years has fundamentally been that it's a club, and it's a club of these 5 countries where every non-permanent member is given the sense of importance because they have a 2-year term as part of the larger Security Council. But ultimately, when it comes to decision making, when it comes to directing global policy, it's these 5 that lead the way. And if we are going to also aspire to be part of the same 5 and the clique that leads the way, how do we then bring in wider conversations? We can talk about the hypocrisy of the West. We can talk about the hypocrisy of Security Council members, whether it is the US or China or Russia, whoever. You can have the conversations about their hypocrisy. But my concern is, can we afford to be hypocritical as well when it comes to the Security Council? And I think we need to be conscious that, we are a country which prides itself on its democratic credentials. We are one of the few countries in the developing world that has a robust electoral democracy. And we are in a position to have a parliamentary system that is supposed to engage on a feedback loop with its citizens as well. Can we actually promote those values? Can we talk about the bigger issues that are challenging the world today? I mean, we're talking about democracies being in retreat across the world, even in the West, where you have a kind of politics that is flooding our geopolitical landscape, which is being driven by hypernationalism. It is being driven by economic grievance. It is being driven by individual national self-interest. The United Nations is not about individual national self-interest. It is about global interest. So are we going to be in a position to actually put our individual national self-interest aside and work in the global interest? Those are questions and concerns. I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you, Mayaji. This is, you summarize some of the critical challenges which are not addressed by our other esteemed speakers. And any student of global relationship, it's a very fascinating discussion we are having today. And we almost have a list of itinerary of the global challenges in any country should be taking or being concerned about, being knowledgeable about, having a position on that. So this is an opportunity to expand that list of our issues, and it may look like a wish list, or it could be also an operation list. And I hope our colleagues who are participating from the Ministry of External Affairs may take note of this discussion. And also, I just wanted to amplify one of your concerns that it is not a talking shop, but in the international agenda, when we said that has got repercussion on domestically. And maybe this is one way to challenge our own hypocrisy sometimes. When we present something internationally, it's an opportunity for inward looking. So it has got certain dynamics, because any country, they cannot just have a global citizen without taking certain position on the global issues. And all countries has to be a responsible global citizen. And India is definitely aspiring to be a global citizen, a responsible global citizen. That citizenship responsibilities, India is played reasonably well. I'm not saying that India is dramatically done well, but India is trying to do reasonably well internationally. There are 2 or 3 areas India has global leadership. India is, what was done, India has got a leadership, moral leadership among the developing countries. So we have to be a spokesperson for the developing countries, and half of the world out of 190 countries, and we are representing more than half of the world governments to speak on behalf of the developing country, and also we are speaking more than half of the world population. So these are some of the moral responsibility in India to act as an ideal citizen, as a global citizen. So So even the Security Council membership, even for 1 month, it's very symbolic, very powerful. We have an opportunity to look at the agenda. Because globally, there are very few avenues to speak about the global agenda, global issues. We know that WHO is there, WTO is there, but these are sectoral issues. World Health Organization cannot have a global mandate to look at this. But I mean, I'm just reiterating an example of the COVID pandemic. The COVID pandemic has challenged the health systems globally. And if you may use the analogy of security concern, and human security is the world security today. So we need to look at this issue, and I hope India's position at the Security Council as an agenda-setting opportunity. Maybe they may have voice about SDGs, leaving no one behind, or 2030 agenda. And this is a time to revamp it, and because all the data says SDGs will be setback. We're going to face serious setback because of the COVID pandemic. So probably this is a time to think about post-SDGs. What is the agenda after 2030? Maybe this opportunity to talk about it, take the leadership. So that way, there are opportunities and challenges. Today's discussion, we managed to come out with some of the issues which are not articulated in a public forum. That way, I congratulate Mr. Anil for organizing this. And this session is open for debate or any questions. If you have, we can take it. You can ask the question through the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask the question. The floor is open for discussion. And I'm just going through the comments on the forum. It's very informed, educative webinar, touching on every aspect of the subject. Kudos to the effort of the organizer, Mr. Anil Nair, Policy Circle. So this is from Vijay Singh. And sorry, there is no feedback form. Somebody is requesting for a feedback form. That is our oversight. Sorry, we didn't. And anyone else, if you want to ask the question, you can type it on the chat box, or you can ask. Let me ask an open question. We talk about India engaging internationally, and it's not a big deal. But why India's engagement internationally is important for domestically? Because global engagement is not a vacuum, not operating in a vacuum. The global engagement has got a domestic implication. And any of you can answer that question. What is the global domestic implication of India's international engagement? Anybody? They're open for any of our speakers.
Well, I can make the first comments if you permit. See, actually, like I gave the example of steel. If globally, if you don't engage into the data privacy norms, which is being talked about at a global forum, or maybe what will be the way the steel is going to be operative, or whether there will be barriers for the steel making, then it is going to hit us economically. So it is very, very important to be a participant in the global forums or the global discussions, an active participant, maybe if possible in the steering wheel. Today, internationally, we are debating about having a common data privacy policy. European Union has come up with something. United Nations have come up with something. We have drafted something which has not yet seen light of the day. Now, definitely, we will not like something to come up internationally which is not suiting our interests. Because on one hand, when we are asking of data localization, we have to see that in the international norms, when it is drafted, this word comes out very clearly. Otherwise, we'll again lose the race. So that is the reason. These are the two examples I like to give that why it is important to engage. If we would have engaged in the vaccine, I'm very sure we could have handled it by making India as a maker of a vaccine, so that okay, the research may come from somewhere, but without IPR at a standard rate, at the cheapest possible rate, multiplying that vaccine production, India has a capability. So we could have played the front role. So these are very, very important that when the initiation of talk comes, our engagement should start off so that we know what is the thinking going across the world. gear ourselves accordingly and proceed. My other colleagues can add on to it. Thank you.
I would like to hear from Ambassador Manjeev Puri.
Thank you, Professor Thomas, and I want to thank all my colleagues. This is so enriching. Let me say this. India, this is just to give a bit of the history. India became a founding member of the League of Nations. And therefore, the interest in multilateralism in the Indian intelligentsia, and I dare say in the Indian population, has always been there. At 17% of humankind, we are extremely conscious, A, that we have a role in global issues, B, that global issues impact us. And so Aruna has just mentioned to you a specific area of steel, no doubt about that at all. But if I mentioned to you the entire set of problem areas that we face, whether it's Kashmir, so many of these issues. So we want to be part of the engagement. And the engagement does have a certain spin-off and run-off as far as the Indian population is concerned. Now, many people say that at the end of the day, winning electorally is the most important thing. Yes, it is in all democracies. The larger the country, more the issues have to be domestic. I used to serve in Nepal, and people in Nepal used to think that, that's the beginning and end of India. Till a journalist from India came and told them, hey, guys, if you don't mind, there's another country which is the beginning and end of India. That happens. But the fact remains that for India, performances on the global stage, what we do and how we engage them are particularly important. Please look at a very simple thing. Look at the headlines of all the newspapers, including the fact that today, even regional channels, Hindi channels, everyone is carrying the debate on whether Anthony Blinken's visit to India went out well or not. So, we are intrinsically bound, and for us, it is very important. And I believe that, this is part of what we consider our manifest destiny as part of the world. So it is important for us. It is important domestically, although, of course, the percentages, etc., can be debated. Professor Thomas, in the course of the discussion, there were 3 or 4 very fascinating points made. I want to thank Maya very much for bringing forth the fact of hypocrisy, that, how will India deal with it? And you were very right in saying, you should bring some of these things forward. The fact of the matter is you have to deal with it. We need to get the votes of those who are not going to make it to the Security Council. And so this game has to be played. But I think we should understand this is a game about global governance. None of us, even the Roman Catholic Church doesn't do that. The Vatican is a member of is an observer at the UN and plays a game exactly like this. So I think, in serious discussions, the name is different. What you say in the public is different. The second point I want to make to people is the UN Security Council is not like the executive board of the UN. It is not even like the board of governors of a company. It is simply another council. There are 2 other councils in the UN. There are 3. One is defunct. The Economic and Social Council and the Human Rights Council. So it is a council which is mandated specifically to deal only with a few subjects. And there is rightly so, because one of the subjects is choosing the Secretary General. The second thing is that its resolutions under Chapter 7 have mandatory binding. In the General Assembly, if you don't like it, you can look the other way. You will feel a little bad, but you can look the other way. If there's a Chapter 7 resolution, you have no choice as a member of the Security Council but to abide by it, which is what the Iran sanctions are essentially all about. Therefore, there's a certain power. But to circumvent that power of these 5, of course, the 5 alone can't do it. 9 affirmative votes are required for any resolution to be adopted. But to circumvent this, the mandate is circumscribed. It's not that on anything in the world they can go about pontificating and running around the way. They are mandated only to look at places where there's actual firing, shots being fired, etc. I mean, let me put it, traditional peace and security measures, and for good reason. Otherwise, the 5 fellows would be running the whole world. They're not. And thank God for that. Which is why I tell people, let us understand there's a difference between what the UN should do, and there I can have no disagreement with whatever anyone else said. But there is an issue about what the Security Council does. It isn't, as I mentioned to you, the Board of Governors of the UN. It isn't. Seshadri Chari ji, if you will agree with me, sir, आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को तो 70 साल से ज्यादा हो गया, अभी रिटायरमेंट थोड़ी हो रही है. तो ऐसा नहीं है. It's a governance platform. And this is a governance platform which now we have had for exactly 100 years, from the beginning of the League of Nations, and many things from Westphalia onwards started in that way. Now, you and I may say that no, the world shouldn't be formed out of member states and this, these Westphalian states, it should be civilizational. That's a different thing, sir. But if we are talking about the way the world is governed, then it is governed by this nation state concept. And this nation state concept, perhaps a platform where at least all of them come together. And then certainly, I mean, those who are powerful, they call some shots. And if you have de jure power, well, you call a little bit more shots than the others. That's the nature of this particular game. And consequently, your de facto power will get known one way or the other. But if you also have de jure, then I am afraid, well, you will matter, even when you don't do things which are particularly good and which are good for the others. But that's the nature of the game, and that's international governance. I believe we as a country have graduated. There was a time when we were ship to mouth, when we were a country where development, cooperation, development aid was the bottom line. But today we are talking about being the largest country, not just the largest democracy, the largest country, third largest economy possibly by 2030. All these are attributes of power. I'm afraid we shouldn't lose sight of that. And if you exercise it well, you get a lot of love. But the game is also not about, if I may put it very bluntly, this love and respect business. This is a game about respect. And I think these are points, when they are understood, they'll be very, very useful and good to us. In terms of COVID, Professor Thomas, sorry that I'm talking so long. In terms of COVID, look, last year when we were handling wave 1 pretty well, we had a number of opportunities. I think the fact that you got to chair the executive board of WHO is an opportunity. I'm afraid we weren't able to leverage them, or till now we haven't been able to leverage them. Now you can keep talking about IPRs and so on and so forth. But everything you must remember in the game is that you really get only one chance. Even if you don't knock it right, it doesn't work. At the UN, two things matter, other than the fact of being grandfather. One is money and the other is people. We do feel diffident on money, and we haven't been particularly good on grooming our people, not good Indians, but grooming our people. Remember, it's an intergovernmental organization. It's not an organization of people. It's an intergovernmental organization. And therefore, the grooming of people and your people and having your people inside, that's exactly what the big boys do. That's exactly what the five do. That's what the Europeans do. That's what the others do. We still have to graduate to that level. We are very happy to see good Indians taking the slot. But, if you want to play the game, you have to step up. Sorry, I took some time. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Thomas, if you may permit me.
Please, I was about to ask you to comment on why we should engage internationally, why we should continue engage globally.
Then I take both these points, the one that Ambassador Puri has mentioned and one that Maya has mentioned. Both are very relevant points, but the limited point that I was trying to make is the issue of conflicts. I mean, if you look at the United Nations engagement, let us say from 1950s or 60s onwards, from 50s to 2020 or 2021, you tell me one conflict which was amicably resolved by the United Nations without the involvement of other interested parties. I mean, even in the case of terrorism, if you say, the only terror organization that was totally defeated was probably the LTT in Sri Lanka. But that was not without any collateral damage. And Sri Lanka is still paying the universal price for being that collateral damage. Don't forget that. United Nations has not come to the rescue of Sri Lanka, even in the case of LTTE. So the limited point that I'm saying is, with age comes wisdom. But what is the question? Where is the question of agility? Does United Nations have that kind of agility, and does it play a role? I'll give you a very small example and stop there. Look at US quitting Afghanistan. What has happened in the last 20 years? You know, when the United Nations Security Council, the same Security Council of which we are talking about now, the Security Council adopted a resolution, I think 1267, if I'm not wrong, a resolution 1267 in 1999. And that resolution was to create the Al Qaeda and Taliban Sanctions Committee. And the objective of the Sanctions Committee was to limit the capacity of Taliban to act as a non-state actor. And then, of course, we know what happened. Ahmad Shah Massoud of Northern Alliance, his killing, and then 9/11 happened, and so many other things happened. After 9/11, what happened? You know, there was something called Operation Enduring Freedom. This Operation Enduring Freedom was to make United Nations play a central role. The word that was used in the United Nations was that it was a central role. And we know about the Bonn Agreement. The Bonn Agreement, and then what they call the International Security Assistance Force. 20 years back, this is what United Nations did. The central role for United Nations, and then International Security Assistance Force, to assist the democratically elected government. Today, we have got a democratically elected government in Kabul. And when the US is quitting, what the US is doing is they have formed what they call the Quad 2. The Quad 2 is Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and US. You think these four countries are going to keep peace in Afghanistan? You think these four countries are capable of stopping Taliban? You think these four countries are capable of establishing democracy? You are talking of one country which doesn't have democracy in its own geography. And where is the United Nations in this? So I think these are some of the issues. I would plead with India's permanent representative there, Ambassador Tirumurthy is a wonderful person, a very erudite scholar on a number of international subjects. I think India should seriously consider passing another resolution. This time, the United Nations Security Council should adopt another resolution calling for a central role for United Nations in Afghanistan in peacekeeping. That was my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Seshadri ji, sir. You very correctly look at the issue of international terrorism. We know that the financing of Taliban, it is not still in the radar of the UN Security Council or even the UN General Assembly, because we know that who is financing, how the financing mechanism of the Taliban is taking place. So, but at the same time, even though there are different mechanisms are there, it's not functional. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, incidentally, even the word terrorism has not yet been defined by the United Nations because there is no agreement. Anyway.
Yeah, you rightly mentioned that India's role in looking at the issue of terrorism and the financing mechanisms for the terrorism and what UN can play, what Security Council can play, what role. You know, that's an important issue, and I hope our permanent representative in New York may look at this issue and use this opportunity to take it. Even a basic issue of a discussion regarding the defining terrorism. We know there are issues about conceptual, theoretical issues, but practical issues as well. But maybe it's an effort, it's an opportunity to take it forward. And also, Ambassador Puri suggested the need for training our own people. Our global engagement should have a much more attention as part of the domestic attention for capacity building, looking at the issues, expertise on our ambassadors, our foreign affairs staff. And if you look at the number, they are not a very significant number to representing our own population. Proportionately, we look at it. So we need to look at our capacity and system to engage globally, need to have much more political attention and also consistency in the global engagement. And when we engage on few issues, take few issues, maybe Security Council issues what we flag it. And for example, one of the critical issues flagged at Security Council is about maritime security, our blue water security. That's some of area which India is expecting a child statement going to come out of it. So in summary, you mentioned about the need for looking at Afghanistan issue as important issue. I would even flag the issue of Myanmar. And probably Security Council, how we engage Myanmar is military regime to democratize the Myanmar society, because that's our neighbor. We have cultural relationship, we have a extensive historical relationship. If we can play even a symbolic role at the Security Council, we have played a very active role. And also there are examples of how the UN played active role. Take the case of the history of East Timor, Timor-Leste's independence, and how their transition arranged from the Indonesian government and the freedom struggle of the East Timor and their independence, and they came into being an independent international government, is an example of UN's involvement, and with the Security Council involvement, one of the few examples of UN Security Council involvement and successfully completing it. But India may take an active role in acknowledging the East Timor, establishing a diplomatic relationship. So there are many challenges internationally. So maybe this may be an opportunity to look at listing down all our priorities and come out with a systematic plan of action as a follow-up of Security Council chairmanship. And I can take one more question. There is questions about Indian Security Council permanent membership, whether it is possible or not. This question came from the audience. And maybe just that's the last intervention, if any of the speakers can speak about, and what could be our strategy, or is it important to have the permanent seat at the Security Council and investing our time, attention, diplomatic skills to getting that, and what is the say on our esteemed speakers? Maybe 1 minute each for whoever is going to speak. Thank you.
I think if I could just weigh in a little bit on this, the process by which India has kind of sought support and alliances to actually become a part of the Security Council, not India alone, but India with Germany and South Africa, I think, were the other countries, the G4 countries who were pushing for UN Security Council membership. That was an initiative that started in the early 2000s, something like that. And, everything seems to have just gone quiet on the G4 front. Every country that is seeking a greater role for itself on the UN Security Council, after, whether it is the coffee club with Italy, Pakistan, those guys, or whether it is the G4, barring those few years in the early 2000s, there was a great push and they were vying and they were competing for the same kind of stature and recognition on both sides of that push. It seems that countries are now going it alone. I mean, the G4 is, I don't know the last time they met as the G4 to have a conversation on the Security Council. So that brings me to the question, actually, again, and it kind of ties in at the beginning. India is there at the Security Council. India is there at the United Nations because the UN does exist. I mean, in Trump's America, we saw America retreat from the Security Council, from the United Nations, but retain its space on the Security Council. So, again, going back to the hypocrisy issue as well. I think India has to first ask itself what it wants the UN to be, and then from there it will get some direction regarding how it hopes to achieve permanent status. I don't think one can happen without the other. That's my view. And just I wanted to just say, in response to the previous comments, I actually agree with Mr. Chari. Very seldom we agree, sir, but today I agree with you on the fact that this month that India is going to be president of the Security Council, given that it coincides with, the spiraling violence we're seeing in Afghanistan, the Taliban taking over territory, maybe it is actually a good opportunity, because the question around India and Afghanistan has been, India's kind of been sitting out. They've not spoken to the Taliban. They're not, it's all non-interference, but that non-interference is at our doorstep right now, and we are standing on the other side of the door. So how can we actually leverage the presidency to look at boots on the ground, but blue berets on the ground, rather than Indian soldiers? So I think that actually is a really valuable suggestion, rather than trying to hive off a portion of the Taliban and negotiate with them, or look at Tajik or Uzbek warlords that may be some united opposition front to the Taliban. Perhaps the best way out right now, as the Americans withdraw, is really to look at UN peacekeeping. That is one experience Afghanistan has not had. We don't know how it will work out. I think the point was made, and it was a valid point, that peacekeeping operations, when they have left, have not necessarily left stable political environments in their wake. But at least for a period of time, they've been able to try and provide some kind of transition. For India, given the security concerns coming out of Afghanistan right now, this is actually, I think, one of the best suggestions I've heard.
Thank you very much. Your
Thank you,
comment.
Maya.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. I mean, it's not that we have not agreed. We have agreed on a number of issues.
Sometimes we agree.
That's good one.
Yeah.
Including whether we should have coffee with milk or without black coffee.
That's right.
When we were in London. Anyway, that's a different story. Yeah, your point. I just mentioned Afghanistan as one of the examples. Because 20 years back, when US was in a big trouble, US personally sort of monitored this whole Bonn agreement. It's called Bonn agreement. If you go back to history, we will see Bonn agreement, and then out of Bonn agreement, they established what they call the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF. Now there is. I mean, why not have another Bonn agreement? Why can't we do that? Why can't we have an Al Qaeda Taliban sanctions committee again? And another thing that I wanted to mention, as far as your intervention on Myanmar was concerned, the only country which has used uh, its superpower status to impose sanctions is US. What in a democratic world, when we are all talking about freedom of navigation, and we talk about rules-based um, world order, how can one country unilaterally issue sanctions not only on India, but also Iran, also Myanmar, and to the strategic detriment of India, this has happened. So, and what is the role of United Nations in this? Did the United Nations ever say that why should you impose sanctions? If at all sanctions are to be imposed, let us have a sanctions committee is there, and let the sanctions committee take charge of the whole situation. This is how these things will have to be monitored. That's what I feel. As far as permanent membership issue is concerned, I think this question has been going on for a long time. India very rightfully feels that it's a time for restructuring of the United Nations itself. So it's not just a question of India becoming a permanent member, but there has to be some mechanism through which countries that matter the most as far as economic engagement and emerging economies are concerned will have to have a greater say as far as the UN system is concerned. More importantly, there was a proposal out of the P5. Four countries have, in principle, agreed for India's membership. It's only China which has come in the way of not admitting. That's a different story, of course. But there have been proposals before to have a qualified entry, in the sense a non-veto membership, non-veto permanent membership. I think there can be no give and take as far as permanent membership issue is concerned. We should strictly adhere to our earlier statements and earlier objective of becoming P6. No ifs and buts can be allowed, and no conditional membership as far as permanent membership is concerned. I think we should stand on that principle. Even without being a permanent membership, India's contribution has been generously accepted by all countries. Therefore, it's not the question of asking for permanent membership. It's It's a question of granting permanent membership to India in the larger interest of global peace. So we should work at that level. Sorry, I leave it at that.
Thank you all the speakers. It was a very wonderful evening, and we have a huge list of India's opportunities and challenges at the international level, and also all the speakers reiterated the need for engaging globally, which has got a domestic benefit, and also India being a responsible global citizen, we have to keep on engaging on that. But what are the priorities? What are the consistencies that we haven't agreed on always? But general consensus is that India needs to engage globally. We should have our own agenda. We should have our own opportunities for discussion. And I thank everybody. And I just wanted to acknowledge and highlight the issue that probably this is the policy circle is the only agency which managed to bring out a very contemporary issue to be discussed publicly. And I don't think any other agency looked at the issue very seriously and assembled a very informed speakers to speak about. And also we have very respectful audience with us. And okay, thank you very much. And I thank everybody. And this is the end of the session. Yeah, and we hope we may be able to circulate the summary of our discussion soon through the policy circle, our occasional publication. Thank you very much and have a good evening and good night. Bye-bye.